Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time of day it is, I pray that your mind, your heart, your body, and your soul are all open to hearing, accepting, and responding to words of wisdom. Ashe. So, what happens when your heart says yes, but Ifa says no? What do you do? What do you do? This is a classic dilemma because um, one thing I know from my work is um, the mind, or let's say data, more accurately, data drives conclusions. Right? When we get certain information, it leads to an answer. 1 plus 1 is 2. End of story, right? But emotion drives action, right? When you feel something strongly, then you're going to be inclined to act. You're going to be inclined to do something based on how you feel. And it's interesting when I think about this dilemma of your heart says yes, but Ifa says no. It kind of characterizes that tension between our thinking and our the conclusions that we draw based on information and our feeling and the actions that issue from our strong emotions. And over the years, I've seen this play out over and over and over again with my clients, wherein, you know, um, people will come and at different stages of their relationships, and they want Ifa's advice on how to proceed. Typically, however, there is a trend whereby people they don't tend to bring up a potential love mate just based on the fact that we exchanged phone numbers, or we talked on the phone a couple of times, or we met in the club, or we met at the library, and I think she's cute, or I think he's dashing. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't usually happen like that. Typically, a person is going to bring up a love interest in the presence of Ifa once their actual love interest, once there's some time invested, once these folks have gotten to know one another, and there's some chemistry. And even more often than not, it's beyond just a little chemistry. It's like these people are involved. They've been dating, they've been intimate with one another, they have an actual relationship, but now they're getting to a crossroads in their relationship where they want to know, well, what can I expect? And because of that trend, um, I'm always hesitant to even ask the question, right? When people get into that point of the consultation where they want to know, answers to some real specific questions. When people ask about their love interest, I tend to pause, right? I tend to pause because I know that you've already made up your mind. Your heart is already set. You know what you want. You know what you intend to do. And it doesn't really make much sense for me to tell you when you already know what you're going to do. So what I try to do in those instances is I try to coach people uh, through, like, just accepting within themselves, where are you in the process, right? How do you really feel? Let's get clear about what you intend to do, because it's one thing to be kind of coy, right? And say, well, I just want to know what Ifa says. But it's another thing to really already have your mind made up. Hey, this is where I'm going. This is what I want. And I want to know what I can expect. Based on this journey that I'm about to take, or the journey that I'm already on, what is most likely to come to be? And how do I make a sacrifice in order to come out of this experience in as favorable a way as possible? Because then you're at least taking a realistic approach to what you're about to do, or what you're already doing, what you intend to continue doing, right? So when Ifa tells you one way or another, you have a real point of reference, and you're not, you know, playing games, for lack of better terms. You already know. And Ifa is able to speak to you according to that level of clarity and certainty that you bring to the equation, right? Because I can tell you that there's so many instances within the sacred text of Ifa that describe the instance, the obvious, right, scenario wherein, hey, you've got somebody who is in love with someone, but it's not good for you, right? This is a relationship that really isn't going to work in your favor, right? Classic example is a verse of Ifa that is so popular that it has become adopted into the folklore, and all Yoruba people are familiar with the stories, like, wherein there was a young woman who was in an arranged marriage, and she was told who she should marry, but she didn't want to follow that advice. She wanted to pick her own husband. And so, in spite of what was predicted for her at birth, she wanted to go out and select a spouse based on her personal preferences. And so she went to the market one day and she found a man. He was dashing and good looking and charming and all that. And she decided that she would elope with this guy. She ran off with him and she married him. But as the story progresses, there's a couple of different variations of it. And one variation is like, as they travel from the market to his home, different parts of the man, he starts to take different parts of himself off. They go into the forest towards his home, and he takes off his suit, and then he starts to disassemble himself, take off his arms and his body, and at the end he's just a head, right? In other versions, there's various days that they're going back to his house, and she discovers that he's just a skull, you know what I mean? Basically, he's emblematic of death. And by the time she figures it out, she has to run for her life, right? In that instance, Ifa says, this is not what you think, right? You're trying to walk into uh, a love situation. You're trying to find love, but what you're going to find is sorrow, right? Go the other direction. In other instances, where I have cast Ifa for couples, we've seen verses of Ifa that talk about two people who are incompatible. One came to the world as a debtor, one came to the world as a creditor. And the debtor swore at the time of incarnation that he would never pay a debt. And the creditor swore at the time of incarnation that he would never give things on credit, right? And so both of these people come into the world, and they end up meeting up, and they are engaging in some activity that is going to end up wherein one party is taking from the other and refuses to give it up until they're essentially on their deathbed. Ifa says that these two individuals are incompatible. Okay. And on and on. There's lots and lots of instances wherein Ifa describes um, incompatible spouses, incompatible partnerships. But in just about every example, in almost every instance, people refuse to take Ifa's advice when it is concerning matters of the heart. And I have, personally lived it. So I certainly am not uh, trying to speak in condemning tones, or in any way judging people who make this error, because I've been there and done that personally, and I can tell you with total certainty that it is not something that you want to volunteer for. The absolute worst calamity of my adult life is associated with choosing a partner that Ifa rejected, right? Because I too fell into that category of, you know, being emotionally attached to someone who was not destined to be with me. As a matter of fact, the person in question was my nemesis, right? And of course, I find all these things out. It got more and more details. Not that I found out; it became more and more detailed as the relationship continued, right? So if I started off by saying no, but then as things spiraled downward, then the messages became more and more and more clear and explicit that, you know, you have essentially, become joined at the hip with your taboo, right? Everything you're doing here with this person is taboo. It's only going to go one way. And ever since, parting ways with the person, I can definitely say, there's a huge sigh of relief, but I can also see how everything has been released. All of the joy of life has been released. All of the happiness and prosperity and progress that is truly my destiny has been released. And I'm able to enjoy the freedom of my prenatal choice, unfettered, undeterred, undistracted by this taboo. And so while I do appreciate the value of the lesson, and I can tell you with total certainty, yeah, if I says no, it means no. I can tell you based on my experience, I would definitely not recommend that anybody take that kind of a chance, right? There's certain lessons that are better learned vicariously through other people, and that's why the verses of Ifa are so important, because you get to live vicariously through the characters in the sacred text. Those are motifs and models that are explaining to you what you can expect. They're telling you why the answer is yes or why the answer is no. So when Ifa says yes, I would lean toward yes. Go with that yes, even if your heart says no, right? Because there will be times where the obvious opposite is true. Ifa says yes and your heart says no. If Ifa says yes, the reason will be revealed to you over time if you are willing to invest and do the work that is necessary to sustain the relationship. Because the Yoruba tell us that no matter what, no matter how you slice it, right? If Ifa says yes or no, the wisdom that it takes to build a house is small compared to the wisdom that it takes to live in the house, right? So a construction worker and a member of a household, right, are on two different levels. There's two different categories of building a home and living in it. So you can expect that there's going to be work associated with maintaining the relationships that are necessary to keep a home. That nothing's going to change that. But when Ifa says yes, right, and your heart says no, well, the chances are that you're going to enjoy more of the how can we say, the resources, the natural resources that are necessary. You've got the raw material. You're working with the right stuff to be successful in that endeavor when Ifa says yes, even if your heart says no, right? Because your heart is really driving you toward action, right? But that action may or may not be consistent with your long-term benefit. And so that is the case, like I said, if Ifa says yes or Ifa says no. When Ifa is speaking in terms of destiny and how to align yourself with your destiny. Your heart may or may not be aligned. so faithfully, right? Your heart is trying to get you to act. That's what it's designed to do. Not that it's not to be trusted at all, but it has to be put into the proper context. Your emotions are intended to drive actions. Your emotions are intended to inspire you to do things and to change, right? The challenge is to make those changes and take those actions in ways that fit the blueprint of destiny. And so, what I would urge you to do is take the time to investigate your intent, your what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is your aspiration? Get really clear about that first, right? Get as clear about that as you possibly can, and understand, like I said in the beginning, where you're coming from, what your intentions are, and be explicit with Ifa when you make your request. That way, when the word comes, you're going to be ready to respond. And then tactically, the best thing for you to do is to start that inquiry sooner than later. As soon as you have some established contact with someone and you think, okay, there's something here. I feel something for this person. There's some chemistry here. But before you have started to have an intimate relationship with that person, I would recommend that you ask Ifa and that you respond. Right? If Ifa says yes, or if Ifa says no, take Ifa's advice and respond accordingly, and see what happens. Right? Learn from that experience. Learn from what it looks like to obey the word of Ifa, as opposed to learning from the experience that comes from disobeying Ifa. Because some lessons are more expensive than others. Emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, financially, some lessons are more expensive than others. And you may not have the constitution to endure that kind of lesson. So don't take the chance. If Ifa says yes, follow what Ifa says. If Ifa says no, follow what Ifa says. And allow your heart to become wiser as a result of submitting to the word of wisdom. Aboru aboye aboshishe.